Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and I'm here to keep you plugged into the dynamic world of technology and the impacts that it has on our lives, business, and indeed world. And today, Kealan Lennon is going to be joining me from CleverCards. And in a world that's increasingly embracing digital payments, CleverCards has made a huge mark. In 2022 alone, the company opened over 100,000 accounts across Europe and witnessed an incredible 5,000% surge in revenue. And to put that figure into perspective, the number of new accounts opened by CleverCards is over 1/9 of all retail bank accounts opened in Ireland during that same period. So I want to learn more about how they've simplified the payment process by enabling instant payment to anyone, anytime, anywhere, even bypassing the need for a traditional bank account. And I want to learn more about their tech-driven approach, how they've streamlined the payments value chain and provided effective management of critical financial services regulations and improving the user experience as a result. And as part of this innovative approach, CleverCards was also recently used by the British state to distribute top-up vouchers for things like fuel and gas and providing a timely relief for UK residents amid this cost-of-living crisis that we're all impacted by. So a tech-powered solution with real-world impact. Buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Dublin, where Kealan is waiting to discuss CleverCards, its astounding growth, and how it's shaping the future of digital payments with its technology. So, a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Hi there, Neil. Yeah, well, first of all, my name is Kealan Lennon. I'm the founder and CEO of CleverCards. And CleverCards is a digital payments platform to enable anyone, anywhere, anytime to both pay and to be paid instantly. And how we do that is with configurable digital MasterCards. So basically what we do, Neil, is we enable businesses to email digital MasterCards to their employees anywhere in the world. And then those employees can use those cards for business purposes, as in it's like a business expense card. Or in a lot of cases, employers are using it as a form of an incentive or reward. So they're putting money onto a prepaid digital MasterCard and issuing it to their employees.
Incredibly cool what you're doing here. You first appeared on my radar when I saw, I think it was last year, you had an incredible growth in 2022. And I've got to ask, because there's so much economic uncertainty at the moment, what factors do you think contributed to that, particularly in comparison to, let's say, traditional retail banks that seem to be closing on every high street around the world?
Yeah, it's a good question, Neil. And obviously we looked at it and, we wondered, was it COVID driven? Was it, were there other third factors out there, as you say, against an economy where, you've got rising interest rates and etc. And the reality of it is we're solving a very, very big problem out there. And that is that, the incumbent payment systems are slow and manual. They operate on legacy bank infrastructure. And so as a result, it's a delay in terms of issuing plastic cards, out to businesses. It's a broken system. So when we came along, and when we launched into the marketplace, we initially launched with employee benefits, Neil, and that's really been the low cost of customer acquisition entry point. So businesses as large as the largest Irish banks to right down to taxi drivers, and doctors and hairdressers and dentists and coffee shop owners and right across, from small to large, they've been using CleverCards initially, as I said, to send cards out to their employees, typically for an employee benefit. And different countries, Neil, have tax systems where it's quite beneficial. So in the Irish market, as an example, you can give up to €1,000 tax free on a gift card, provided it's blocked from any sort of cash extraction on it. So, but it's a digital MasterCard that works everywhere in the world. So you can pay your petrol, your car insurance, your electricity, your travel, your motor tax. It works absolutely everywhere, both in store because it's Apple and Google Pay enabled, or online. So I think there was a problem out there, Neil. We solved for it. There was a need. We solved for it. We grew by about 5,000% year on year, and we're still growing at the same rate. It really has been rapid.
And I'm curious, we'll have people listening all over the world. Which markets do you serve? Is it just Ireland, UK, Europe, or is it beyond? Where do you serve?
Yeah, so it's mainly Europe at the moment, Neil, and I'm quite aware that actually I think the majority of your listeners are in the United States, and the US is certainly on our agenda. But the reality of it is, and kind of the inspiration behind the business, Neil, was I was over with some of the Irish ministers in China. And when you look at the technology landscape, the States has been way ahead, on so many aspects of technology. They've been way ahead. But interestingly, when it comes to financial services, and very specifically payments, it kind of goes from east to west in terms of the innovations. So when I was there 5-6 years ago in China, nobody was using plastic cards. Everybody was paying with their phone. As you move towards Europe, you've got not the same degree of adoption. But when you move to the United States, it's even less. And, there's about 20% national adoption of Apple Pay and Google Pay in the United States, up to about 40% in, let's say, New York and San Francisco, where, personally speaking, I haven't had a plastic card or a wallet that I've carried around Europe in nearly 4 years at this stage. Everything is just on my phone.
And obviously, the value proposition that you guys offer is that ability for CleverCards to deliver payments to anyone, anywhere, anytime, without the need for that traditional bank account, plastic card. And it seems like a significant disruption to the traditional financial industry. But can you tell me a little bit more about the technology behind all this that makes it all possible?
Sure. So I think the technology is certainly a very important part of it, Neil. We are essentially like a digital bank, but that's a glorified term that a lot of the consumer fintechs and neobanks were calling themselves. We're not a bank. We're very much focused around the payments piece. Now, I know that's certainly a very, very important central hub to it. But we had to build the entire infrastructure from being a distributor of an e-money institution, passported into all of the central banks across Europe and in the FCA as well. From that point right up to the card issuing piece. So the ability to issue a digital MasterCard in every single country in Europe that is also certified by Apple and Google. And that in itself, Neil, I mean, it's amazing how the world has just become more globalized. We are not necessarily always having to target a company in France or Germany or Spain. And quite often you could have a company, that's in Ireland or in the United Kingdom that's got employees in Spain. But you might have a bank that only has the capacity to issue cards in one country, whereas we can do it right across Europe. And then we're a payment processor. So kind of the opposite to what Stripe is. They're a payment processor for the merchant, whereas we're our own payment processor because we integrated with MasterCard. That was a very, very big integration and a very unique integration that we did with MasterCard, and gave us a huge amount of credibility, whereby there's literally no party between us and MasterCard. So if Neil Hughes uses his card in the States or in South America or in Thailand or in London, no matter where you are in the world, we have to process that transaction in sub 1 second. That's the level that we're certified to. So process the payments anywhere in the world in sub 1 second. So the infrastructure is really, really important. It's the biggest part of it because, the stage of growth of the company then was, okay, having built that infrastructure, then it was into the customer acquisition model to scale this out. And I think as we move forward, this is going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting for the US guys that look at Europe, because, trying to rebuild that infrastructure, it took us over 3 years. It's difficult, for the incumbent banks that are out there. It's just impossible to go, plugging out 2 plugs in a bank and hoping the lights don't go out in the other room, And we've obviously got the benefit of being able to come at it clean. We've taken it all into the cloud. And right through all of the penetration testing and security testing with MasterCard. So we're way up there in terms of the infrastructure is in place. So we've got the infrastructure in place to be able to issue digital cards all over Europe. For now is where our focus is. And that's only, as I said, Neil, because the US market isn't ready for a digital only solution. And we went digital only. That was a big move as well, Neil. A lot of people did say, could we get a plastic card? And well, we just said, look, we have to lead here. So we led with, no, we are only going to do digital. So just like, you managed to put a digital COVID cert into your phone because you couldn't get into the restaurant or bar, you worked it out, okay? It's very, very simple. So that's really to give you a sense of the infrastructure that we have, processing payments globally, but very much a focus on Europe for now.
And I'm curious, what kind of challenges did you face at CleverCards when navigating the the complex financial service regulations from KYC, KYB, AML, PCI compliance. Apologies for the acronym overload there, but is there anything you can share around some of the challenges that you had to overcome and how you did that?
Yeah, and it's a great question, Neil, and it's something that's playing right into our advantage. So the regulators, if you take anti-money laundering as a broad brush topic, both here and in the United States, but we're now up to the sixth directive on it, and there's more sophistication coming in all the time as to how fraudsters will money launder. And what CleverCards did was we focused on tokenization. Don't want to get too technical for your readers, but or your listeners. But in terms of tokenization, everything we do is with tokenization. And the digital verification, Neil, that we're doing is at the phone level. So first of all, we operate in the B2B environment only. That's a very important statement. So we're not focused on consumers. So there's still risk, don't get me wrong, in business, but there's less risk than there would be in the broader consumer environment. So we're very focused on business. So we know the source of funds, it's coming from businesses. So it's businesses that are giving us the funds to put into e-money accounts to distribute to employees, okay? And what we're actually doing is KYC at the phone level. So we've got literally passport level. We use the same vendors that do the passports in the airports all around the world. So we're doing passport level, government level biometric verification in terms of selfies and movement tests and everything else in around the phone. We lock the card in the funds to the phone. So, if Neil Hughes has a card, there's no real need, Neil, for you to give the card to somebody else, another one of your fellow employees, which was happening with the CEO and the CFO when they had the Barclays card or the Santander card or the whatever card it was been passed around the office. That's trying to fix a problem that exists. And we said, no, if Neil has a card, it's only for Neil. It's locked to your phone. It can't be shared. Now, it can actually be shared, but the problem is, Neil, we need to KYC the next guy. So if you're trying to do it for anti-money laundering, you're going to find out that there's easier ways. Go up robbing banks because it'll be a lot easier, It's difficult. It's very, very difficult. And we lock it down. And if you say, well, Kealan, my real problem is I want to be able to give a card to 3,500 of our team members. Well, that's no problem. We can give 3,500 cards to each of the team members, and each of them are digitally verified at a mobile level. And then we do ongoing, payment fraud monitoring and everything else as well. So we've embraced it, Neil, because we actually think ultimately it's where the industry's going in the next, 5 and 10 years. So when you know that that's the trend and you have that vision, and, it kind of, if I roll back, Neil, it's a little bit like, years ago, there was a company called Blockbusters that was a branch network that used to distribute circular pieces of plastic that we used to call DVDs. And Steve Jobs and Netflix, they knew where the industry was going. And they came up with, Netflix, came up with a digital platform for movies. And in the world we live in today, there are rectangular pieces of plastic that hopefully someday we will say we used to call debit and credit cards. CleverCards built a digital platform for payments, just like Netflix did and Spotify did. But when you take that vision of where you want to take it, regulation and anti-money laundering is right in the middle of it. So we've embraced it. And we think it's going to be an advantage to us. So when banks and others, and other regulators partner with us in terms of actually looking for a solution, we're at the forefront of it. So we think it's actually going to be a competitive advantage that we have. And that's why from the get-go, we said, if we can solve this problem around, being very advanced in terms of compliance and regulation around the AML side of it, that's actually going to be an asset for this business.
And what I love about what you've done here is how you've managed to streamline the payment process by removing all those unnecessary steps and indeed participants. But can you elaborate on that, and also how it works and the kind of impact that it has on the user experience?
Yeah, so I think digital only was the starting point, Neil. And what comes with digital is challenges, because, if you get an email or a text now with a digital MasterCard from CleverCards and you're an employee sitting in France and I'm in Ireland, it's instant. So, you're straight into, fraud rules engines and algorithms, because it's all instant. You don't have the luxury of being able to send out paperwork in the post and, not activate a plastic card for a few days while you do your checks and all the rest, etc. You don't have it. So the user experience is slick. It is just instant. It is like 60 seconds, if even. It's an email, so I could email you a card this second, and you can activate it on the phone. I did one this morning with a customer in less than 3 minutes. They were completely entirely activated, and they're spending their funds. So, and in the what's happening out there, Neil, we were at a conference yesterday, and we met some CEOs that, they're actually trying to bypass the system. They're putting cards into the names of, maybe one of their assistants and sending it out to one of the managers in Poland. It's in somebody else's name because they can't get a card otherwise. And the only way people are working around the system, and you've got, as SCA and other things came along, you've got, CEOs or CFOs where their phone is pinging every 10, 15 minutes. Neil Hughes, wants approval for $5,000 that he's spending with AWS, or, Neil Hughes is checking into a hotel in France, and, it's just a broken system. So we are very much focused on very, very slick user experience. And we can configure them, Neil, as the other side. We've delegated all that authority. The challenge out there for years, if you go back 30, 40 years, I'm going to be slightly controversial in what I say here, because it's a trust thing, and that changes over time. But, employers were not handing company credit cards to 3,500 people in the company. It just wasn't happening. It hasn't happened in 30 years. Okay. And the reason is, there's an element of lack of trust or a concern that if I give an employee a credit card with a 50 grand credit limit or a 30 grand credit limit, because that's all the bank does, what happens if with CleverCards, there's real time verification. Instant access to where the cards are being spent. So if you've got an employee in France, literally at 2:20 when they tap that in a restaurant or they tap it with AWS, it's on a screen at the manager level to see where the cards are being spent. And all of that information goes straight into the accounting system. So the visibility, the transparency, putting all the controls around it, that was the problem that needed to be solved. And we've solved it by then making it easier for businesses to distribute these cards to all their employees. And then lots of other things come up. A lot of the professional services guys and project management guys, Neil, they will in turn want to recharge those expenses. And, you had employees doing expense claim forms at the end of the month, and you have all that delay, and then they can't recharge the client. Whereas with CleverCards, literally on a Friday at 5:30 p.m., you could download all the transactions, build them onto your client in turn with a client code in there. Once it goes digital, you need to think like Netflix. You need to think about, your favorites and your library and your genres. And it's the same concept that we've built. An example being the British government, Neil, went to MasterCard and wanted to do, instead of it being an employee benefit, it was a social welfare benefit. And we've enabled them to issue cards to citizens in the United Kingdom where the MasterCard has been configured to only work in 26 utility providers. So if the recipient, Mary or John, gets the card, the card is for its intended purpose, to be able to pay with British Gas, to be able to pay with other energy providers, but it won't work in Starbucks. It won't work in the gambling site. It won't work in Tesco. It's for its intended purpose. So enabling businesses to configure a digital MasterCard for their employees is something that's never been done before. And that then works where you can say, does that mean I can give somebody who's placing ads on Instagram, who might have joined the company 2 weeks ago, I can give him or her, just out of college, a card with a £150,000 credit limit on it, a prepaid card. You're going, yeah, the problem, Neil, is it'll only work on Instagram. So if they do try to spend it in the bar or the restaurant, it won't work. And you go, okay, so you're telling me I can configure the card so it only works on Instagram. They don't have to use my card. My card's not going to get blocked. They've got the card instantly. They can use 5 different cards for 5 different clients and 5 different programs. And really that's what we've done. We've disintermediated the entire industry and said, look, we're just going to come at it the way that Netflix came at it.
And of course, we've already discussed the economic uncertainty. And one of the things that put CleverCards on my radar was when I learned how you played a significant role in the UK's response to the cost of living crisis that we're seeing here by providing top-up vouchers for things like fuel and gas, etc. So can you tell me a little bit more about that initiatives and also the technology that made it possible too?
Yeah, so it as I said, it was first of all, the British government wanted a digital card. They wanted us to carry out the KYC on the recipients, it's been highly successful. because there's more programs coming in behind it. That, as I said, the technology is that we can enable them to configure the cards. So, one stage I think there was 25 utility providers on it, and they changed it to 26. That takes 5 minutes. And it can be configured, as I said, for its use case. So it's back to the core thing, Neil, of configurability. So whether it's an employer that wants to configure them for an employee or a government that wants to configure it for a social welfare recipient, that is the technology that we've built because we're a payment processor. We're the ones that control it. That's how it works. So if, as I said, if somebody goes to try and use it in a different place, it hits the MasterCard network, comes back to CleverCards, authorize or decline. We say decline, because we're the payment processor behind it. And so yeah, that's been great, I have to say. And I think you spoke about the cost of living and the economy, and I think the one thing that we did, Neil, kind of at a more macro level was. The last number of years, as you well know, has been bananas in terms of the technology environment. Low interest rate, free money, and so many technology companies, and indeed fintechs. They kind of manufactured, I would say, awe-inspiring sales growth, significant amount of capital that they invested. In my view, described profitability, because I've seen some of the pitches and heard some of the pitches, without even a clear path to profitability. We generate highly profitable margins because it's all digital and all scalable. So we didn't go burning through significant amount of capital. Instead, we spent a lot of time building that infrastructure. And then when we came to the market, we were highly efficient in terms of our cost of customer acquisition, because generally, as I said, we went in at the employee benefit level. And what that meant was we're going into businesses where, big professional services firm might have 25,000 employees, and every single one of them have got a CleverCard. Now, they've just come from the HR office, and guess where they walk to, Neil? They walk across the corridor to the CFO office, and they're going, why are we putting business expenses on our personal, cards when we could be using CleverCards? So it's really been something that's been quite unique in terms of our customer acquisition strategy, and that's really what's given us a moat, because a lot of people talk about the technology being the moat. Yeah, it took 3 years and there's a hell of a lot in it, but I'm a firm believer in the Michael Porter and the Warren Buffett style that really, when it boils down to it, is how can you mop up the market in a highly efficient way with extremely low cost of capital that would be envious to anybody else, and that's what's really exciting for us.
And obviously, you saw fantastic growth last year. And looking ahead, how do you see CleverCards continue to evolve and grow, not only in 23, but beyond, and particularly in terms of things like services, user base, and geographical expansion? Is there anything you can share around there?
Yeah, I think, Europe is our focus. We've got a lot of inbound inquiries actually in the Middle East. I think the Middle East is more likely to be our next market before we go to the States, because it's ready for digital payments, where the States isn't ready for digital payments yet. So our focus really, we've stayed very, very focused, Neil, which is around getting cards into the hands of employees. I think where the extension of that has taken place, as I said, we started with employee benefits, and then it was employees saying, can we not use it for our own business purposes, business expense purposes? But the other one that's come off the back of it is customer benefits. So we then had a lot of, sales and marketing teams saying, can we use the same cards to hand out to our customers for customer benefits? So, and that's really where a lot of our growth is coming from. We're so far ahead at the moment, Neil. I mean, it's been phenomenal. Like our quarter one targets, our quarter one budget was achieved at the end of February. So kind of got all the senior leadership team together and said, well, look, let's now focus on quarter two. Our quarter two targets, which we're in at the moment, were achieved by the end of April. Okay, so we're having another offsite in a couple of weeks' time to talk about, right, let's maybe now start looking at our 24 numbers to bring the entire plan back. That's where we're at the moment. And I don't just mean our sales numbers and the customer acquisition numbers. I mean the entire plan, We weren't going to raise capital until the middle of next year. And we may raise that earlier. We've kind of had a couple of term sheets in already that we're beginning to think about, should we do that now? I mean, as an entrepreneur, you always want to drive the valuation higher. So you want to wait later rather than earlier. But you're sitting here at the moment going, I mean, this is just bananas. I don't think I've ever been involved in a business where, as one of our recent sales hires said Kealan, it's like shooting fish in a fishbowl. It's just a no-brainer with the solution that we've got. So it's very exciting, I have to say. And, we're all buzzed up about it,
And I think CleverCards has made a name for itself disrupting traditional banking and payment methods, especially with your customizable MasterCards there. But I'm curious, when you look around, are there any other areas of the financial sector that you think might be ripe for disruption that you might want to go after as well?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So if you think of what's actually going on, Neil, incumbent payment systems are slow. They're manual and they operate on legacy bank and payment processing infrastructures, okay? So that's the core problem. The knock-on effect from that problem is that delayed payments result in working capital problems, whether it's for a merchant or a customer, an employee or a contractor, okay? So then you'd say, well, how do you solve for that? Accelerating access to those funds is one way to do it. And by accelerating access to those funds, it means the employee who, might be having a difficult January after Christmas time, and it's always a long month for people, maybe they don't dip into the overdraft or, as much as they would have previously done. So rather than offering them an overdraft, which is a sticky plaster for another problem, you're saying, well, let's give them earlier access to their money. So whether it's the employee or the retail merchant is getting earlier access to the money, you're disrupting that side of it. I think what we're going to do is we're definitely going to move down the road of digital credit cards. I think there's going to be a business opportunity for that. We're not going to do it this year. We'll probably do it next year. At the moment, we're just signing up all these businesses. But I think, when I look at some of the biggest brands in the world that are using CleverCards, there's no reason why we couldn't give them credit. I don't think CleverCards will actually, give and take any credit risk, Neil. I think we will probably partner with some of the larger banks that will have no issue whatsoever in underwriting some of these businesses, and we'll be the facilitator in the middle. But it really is just about that legacy broken system. And the irony of it is we've got banks that are using CleverCards to gift to their employees because they can't do it themselves. They can't configure. If you think of the logic, Neil, who's going to ring a bank and say, I want to give an employee a card with 150 grand credit limit on it, but I only want the card to be spent on Instagram. Don't know which bank you'd ring to get that. Who's going to ring a bank to say, I've got 15 people going to a conference next week and I want to issue them with a card that expires next Thursday? Oh, well, sorry, have you rang the right number, And so there's a problem out there that we've solved for. I think that really is, the next step, as you say, in the other parts of the financial services sector. Credit cards is probably bringing credit to the existing cards is probably the next kind of strategic move that we have there. We're engaged with a number of merchant acquirers, so that they're the payment processor and the acquirers that basically process the acceptance of card payments. And in some territories, the merchant is not getting access to those funds straight away. Whereas with CleverCards, they could actually receive money in, let's say, a restaurant owner could receive their money, they're there at midnight on a Friday night. In the old days, Neil, they'd open up the till. There might be 2 grand in the till in cash. Now they open up the till and they have a bunch of Visa receipts or MasterCard receipts, but they still haven't got the money. It's not paid over into their bank account until later. Whereas with CleverCards, we can link a digital MasterCard to that account, which means literally at 1 o'clock in the morning, they could start spending the 2 grand that they earn. So kind of money, it's a ledger, money in, money out. And because we can give them digital MasterCards that they can access the money earlier. So there's lots of, I keep going back to it. I think it'll be, when you look at the way that the movie industry and the music industry evolved, it wasn't just about getting rid of that plastic LP. I think before the call, you told me you're coming to see some concert in Dublin near the end of the year. But, in the old days, it was, you got the LP or you got the CD, and I'm sorry, pal, but there's 15 tunes on it. And Steve Jobs came along and said, why? And it was going to be a brave move, even with the publishers. And when they said, yeah, but, if we only allow them buy one tune for $1.99, are we going to cannibalize our business? Well, you know what? The music industry grew. The CD industry didn't grow, but the music industry grew. the movie industry. I've watched more movies on Netflix now than I've ever gone to the cinema in the past. So I think the industry grows by really looking at the needs. And when you bring digital to bear on, digital allows you to do all those things with configurability, as I said, not to repeat myself, but whether it's configuring genre and wish lists and sharing and all the things that go with it, you can do it. Obviously, in a financial services sector, the bar is much, much higher in terms of fraud protections and anti-money laundering and everything that you have to do. But therein lies the value add.
I think that's a brilliant moment to end on. But before I let you go, I always like to end the podcast on a light-hearted note. So I'm going to ask you to reflect on your career, look back. What was the funniest or most interesting story that happened to you?
Good question. And the one that comes to mind, Neil, was as much as I'm broadcasting about the future of payments being digital, would you believe we were in Italy about 3 years ago? We were going down to meet a distributor, and on the way to the airport, I forgot my wallet. And when I got to the airport to meet my colleagues duly reminded me that, Mr. Lennon, you seem to be telling the world that the future is digital. You've got your mobile. You don't need to turn home and get your wallet. So we'll see how this goes. So got on the plane. And of course, when it came to having a coffee that morning, the guys on the plane said, I'm sure you're paying for this, Kealan, which I did with my phone. We got to the other side and they said, Kealan, we should go by train. Will you get the tickets? So I walked up to the ticket machine with my phone tentatively, and it worked. Then we went and had our second meeting. It was lashing rain, even though this was in the middle of it. It was lashing rain. Of course, you can't get a taxi, Neil, because when it's raining, everyone's get a taxi. Yeah. We were only going 800 meters. And there was a guy across the road, just at a kind of a shack, on the side of the road, a trader, selling umbrellas. And one of the guys said, listen, let's grab 3 umbrellas. And, because all we're going to do, we're going to get soaked. And I ran across the road. And as I was running across the road, one of my colleagues shouted across, hey, Kealan, ask him, does he take Apple Pay? And of course, that's when I got caught. So I went all the way through from here to Italy and back. And I only, in one instance at that stage, did I get caught. And it was with the umbrella selling man. But other than that, Neil, that was the day that I genuinely never bought my wallet again, because I realized I had the confidence to do it. So there's the story.
But do you pack an umbrella? Do you pack a brolly now when you go? Just think.
Occasionally.
What a great story. I love that. And for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about CleverCards, where would you direct everyone to find out more information?
Yeah, CleverCards.com is probably the best.
Awesome. Well, I love chatting with you today. You've had a fantastic year last year. This year seems to be going from strength to strength too. I'd love to get you back on next year, see how things are continuing to evolve and any other stories that you pick up along the way. But more than anything, just thank you for sitting down and sharing your story today.
Thank you so much, Neil.
So a huge thank you to Kealan there for talking about how they're reinventing the payments landscape across Europe with technology, and how in just a few short years they've dramatically transformed how the public and private organisations handle their transactions. With thousands of businesses already on board and significant plans for the year or years ahead, I think I'll be keeping a close eye on their next innovative strides in the world of digital payments. So thank you, Kealan, for your time and insights, and to every one of you listening for joining us here today. And as always, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @Neil C. Hughes. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on today's episode. But that's it for today, so just a big thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.